Hello, hello. Today it is the Shelfspace discussion of The Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm joined by Stephanie from Stephanie's Bookverse, and let's discuss. I guess we will start doing some non-spoilers, although I feel like a lot of people have read this, so non-spoilers to some extent, and then some spoilers, and then maybe talk about like the book and the film and how we feel about the adaptation. So I guess to start off, like, what would you rate the book? How do you feel overall about it, Stephanie? And everyone in the chat, how do you feel about it?
Well, me personally, it's 5 stars. Like, I feel like that's not even a question for me. And I don't know. I think it's really hard to rate books that I'm rereading that I read when I was younger because, like, it's almost impossible to separate the nostalgia from it. But still, like, I absolutely love this series. Like, I think this book's so good. 5 stars for me.
For me, I have like the nostalgia of it because my dad did read it to me as a child growing up. So I have that nostalgia, but I don't feel as though I've got like full on nostalgia for it. So for me, it was 4 stars that I enjoyed it, but I had some faults with some of the pacing and the extreme amount of songs.
There is so many songs in this book.
I was like, are we seriously having another song? Like another one?
It's so true. It's so true.
There's like one every chapter pretty much. I was like, another song? Really? I mean, how do other people feel about the songs? Like, is there like someone that really appreciates the songs in?
I
in
know
the
there are people who really love the songs because I've like seen it in comments of some videos where like the songs are amazing. Like I don't know how you guys could skip because I like some people say like I just skip the songs, I don't even read them. And some people are like that's horrible. Like you can't skip the songs. They're such an important part of the book. I'm like,
yeah, you skip the song. No, like
I don't feel like you're missing much if you skip them.
I originally was listening to all the songs, and by the end, because I listened to the audiobook, by the end I was like, there's just too much. There's just too many of them. I was like, come on, like I could appreciate some of them, and then some of the time I was like, oh no, it's another one. It felt a bit like, I think I messaged you about it, saying that it was like a Disney fantasy, because like Disney is all about songs mixed in, and this was very sing-songy.
It was. I do think that I'm pretty sure Tolkien was big into poetry, if I'm not mistaken. So that
Probably
might have
more likely to be in poetry than Disney.
right. And so I think that like played into him putting so much of that in the book. But I think also I feel while I was reading it, he was trying to kind of teach us some of the history and some of like the things about the world through the songs instead of just like putting it into the book, which like I can appreciate, even if I would prefer it to just be written regularly. Like I see what he's doing. It's not my style, but
like some of them I felt like there was like a purpose that they were providing more world building, and some of them I was like, this is just absolute rubbish. Like some of the Tom Bombadil songs, I was like,
oh my gosh, the Tom Bombadil songs don't even have real words in half of them.
I was like, what is going on here? So yeah, aside from the excessive songs, I'd say I enjoyed it. I think it was fun to revisit these characters and get to see them again. And a lot of my memories, I think, maybe for quite a few of us that might be, I guess, maybe of our age, saw the films and have a lot of the film in our heads compared to the book. And I feel like, although it's been many years since I've seen the film, like I do, when I picture the characters, I picture the actors.
Yeah, me too.
Like that cast has sort of ingrained itself in my brain. And so when I think of The Lord of the Rings, I do have that as well in my head. So I'm wondering like how much that influences my thoughts on the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think that's probably true of a lot of like movies and books, like the Harry Potter ones, because they're so big with the adaptations. And so I agree. I think that you almost can't separate it when you watch them so young. Like but I did read the books first. But even now, rereading the books, I see those characters, even though like I might not have imagined them that the first time reading. I actually don't remember how I imagined them the first time reading, because I don't like see pictures in my head when I read. So yeah.
Yeah, I can't really remember what order we were doing it in because it was so long ago. I can't remember if we'd started reading them and then the films came out, or if it was all around a similar time.
Hello, welcome. 5 stars from Sam. Yay.
But I haven't read it 5 stars.
So what? I appreciate the support with the 5 stars.
So yeah, do you have any like non-spoilery thoughts aside from what we've discussed on the songs?
On the songs. I'm sure I saw the old cartoon movies before. They're actually, that's true, but I only watched the Fellowship of the Ring old cartoon movie. I don't remember seeing any of the others besides the Fellowship.
I'm sure, I don't know if I saw it, but I remember seeing it in the library and being like, what's this? Because it was just
not
like,
that good.
Because it was just as the actual film was coming out. And I was like, look, The Lord of the Rings is already in the library. And then my dad was like, that's not the Lord of the Rings film that's coming out.
No, it's very corny. And the part that I remember so vividly, which is crazy because I know I watched him when I was tiny, is when he crosses the ford to go to Rivendell, and he's like, you shall not have the ring nor me, this little like cartoon Frodo. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that was cut in the live action one because that was so corny.
So part of me, like, what do you think about the characters? Because I loved Sam.
Oh my gosh, Sam is the best. He's so sweet.
On my reread, I was like, because I feel like I've seen a lot of like not so positive opinions from Sam. Maybe it's just Alan and his opinions of Sam.
Alan has very terrible opinions on hobbits. We can't listen to him.
So I was like, I've heard people didn't like Sam, and I was reading this. I was like, Sam is the best thing ever. Sam's like the best character in this.
I love him.
So yeah, justice for Sam.
I agree. I think he's just so loyal and sweet and just so good to Frodo the entire time. Like, oh my gosh, he's the best. Sam is the hero of the whole thing. Yes. And speaking of the movies, I feel like Sam was so perfectly cast in the movies. It was probably one of their best casting choices. I thought it was amazing. Actually, I think all their casting choices actually were pretty dang good, but
yeah, I think they did a very good job with the cast. But yeah, no, I absolutely love Sam. Did you have a favorite character?
I feel like Sam probably is my favorite character too. I really love him, but I love Gandalf. Gandalf has always been one of my absolute favorite. The conspiracy.
I did like that bit where they were like, so we've planned it all that we're coming with you.
And I forgot that in the books, Fatty was involved too. I totally forgot about him. And then all of a sudden he was listening to them talk. Like, why are you saying this in front of outsiders? But in the book, he's not. He's actually part of their little group. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, Gandalf is definitely like a big character.
I love him so much. He's like my favorite. And I love the actor too who played Gandalf. I just think he's so good. Fellowship was the first midnight opening showing I ever attended. My pop me read Fellowship before I could go. Little. Yeah. I didn't go to any of them on the midnight openings, honestly. I think that would have been so much fun to like dress up and go. But I mean, I was in elementary school when the first one came out, I think, and then middle school when the next ones came out. So I didn't do that. My parents were into that thing.
I can't remember. Definitely didn't go to an opening night one. I definitely remember, I can't remember if it was the second or the third one. I was in France. And we like this was at a time where they weren't really showing English films, and we like went to this back end like of nowhere cinema. The thing is, my family's like they live around Paris, so it's not like they're in a small place. Right. Like they're in a city, the capital, and we couldn't find an English showing of. I think it was the Two Towers, and we're going around Paris trying to find it in English. We're like, it can be have the subtitles on the bottom, but we need it in English. We can't have it in French. And like.
I know.
And then we ended up in the middle of nowhere with this showing. So
that's cool that you found one, though.
Yeah.
Twilight. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow.
Oh,
I'm impressed.
so yes. Does anyone else have any favorite characters aside from
Merry and Pippin. Yes. My
Sam?
mom wouldn't let us see him.
Frodo annoyed me more than more than he did originally. I think I was just like, oh my god, you're so annoying.
I felt like he was just kind of a dull character, really. Like, I just didn't feel any kind of strong connection to him this time, which I know I did the first time reading. And I won't say why because of the spoilers, but I know the first time through I like was very attached to Frodo. So I don't know why I didn't love him as much this time around.
In some ways, it just felt like he was just along for the ride. Like Sam, Pippin, Merry, like they all chose. They were like, "You're going, so we have to go too. We are your friends. We're going with you." Whereas Frodo's just like, "Oh well, I guess I'm on this quest now."
Yeah. I just kind of I don't know. I feel like everyone around him had more of a personality, more of a drive and a reason they were doing this. And he was just kind of like, well, the ring came to me, so I guess it's me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas I didn't ever feel that, like, from my original read or from watching the films growing up. Like, I didn't have this annoyance with Frodo. Whereas this time around, I was like, oh, Frodo.
I feel like I wasn't annoyed with him, but I just didn't care about him really in this one, where like he wasn't one of the characters that I was ever excited about or like, oh, learning backstory or any of that kind of stuff. I was just like, meh.
Meh. And then the other thing that I was like noted was pacing, because I feel like it does have a different pace to modern fantasy books. Like there is a lot of world building.
Yeah.
A lot of world building in this. And you can really tell how much work went into creating the world. And I feel like there's so much more to the world than we get in here. Like we just get hints to loads of different bits of the world that has been created. I feel as though there could be like this whole encyclopedia of.
So there kind of is, as well. Like there is so much more within the world. There's like I know there's like the Silmarillion and then the one of like Luthien and Beren, their story, and then there's another one. But I think there's like 12 books that go through the history of it, if I'm not mistaken. Like I'm not a Lord of the Rings lore master by any means.
I tried to read the Beren Luthien one a couple of years ago, and I DNF'd it because it was quite dry. And I think the original, it tells a story in like multiple ways. Like it tells the story through a poem, it tells the story through prose. And I was like, okay, well, I liked the original story, but I don't need to see this story rewritten in so many different ways.
That is weird.
And I was like, it just felt very dry.
I just felt like they would write it the way they kind of wrote Lord of the Rings, where it was its own story written in prose, but it's not like that.
No, there was it in song, in prose, in lots of explanation going along around it. It just felt very dry. I was like, this does sound like an interesting story, but it had just been beefed out with like other bits and pieces or things. So I didn't connect.
Yeah. No, I do agree though, when you were talking about how they have a bunch of history and lore and all these things, that I noticed it so much more on this read than I did before, probably because I was so much younger and so I didn't really care as much, but they didn't explain a lot. There was a lot of things in here that they kind of vaguely mentioned or kind of went over, but they didn't really dive deep into it. And I know that in a lot of modern fantasy, when they do that, they tend to go back to it later. Like it's things that we'll learn in the next book or further on in the series or something, or it'll come back into play. But I feel like in this book, a lot of times they'll kind of talk about it and it'll be this vague but very interesting thing that you want to know about, and then he will just leave it and move on, and we never get to actually learn what happened there. And you're like, what?
Yeah, like when I read The Hobbit last year, there was just this one sentence and it was like, oh, and Gandalf went off to deal with the giant sandworms. And I was like, did Frank Herbert copy? Did he steal the giant sandworms from Tolkien?
Probably.
And I was like, but what about these giant sandworms? What are they? And it's like this one sentence reference to them in The Hobbit.
Yeah, it's just so crazy how he'll talk about things but never go into detail, even in later books. Like all the stuff with the barrows and the barrow wights, like I feel like we got minimal explanation on that, and they just kind of like skated over it. Okay, then I guess here we go. 70s animation, yeah, they've done that.
Have they?
Well, that's what were the animated ones. They had to have been from the 80s because I watched them when I was very young. At least the 80s, maybe 70s. Like they're so old and they're so bad.
Yeah, that did annoy me. I was like, just get yourself together. Why are you hanging around
Yeah,
just
like
for your
why did he
birthday?
stay in the Shire so long? Like he should have left.
It's like, just
I don't
go,
understand.
go. But maybe that's like the Hobbit mentality of.
It is a little bit, but I mean, they just hung out there, and also they just hung out in Rivendell for a long time too. I'm like, is there no sense of urgency? Because I feel it.
Not for them. No, they don't have the urgency. They're just
Yeah.
like, let's just pause. Let's just enjoy life.
Yeah, and they like waited till the middle of winter. They're like, okay, now let's go. I'm like, y'all could have left at the beginning of autumn. What are you doing?
Okay.
Killed me.
Do you have any other like non-spoilery thoughts?
Non-spoilery. I don't think so. I think we could jump into spoilers. We're like 16 minutes in.
Okay, so now we're moving into spoilers. If you haven't read The Lord of the Rings or The Fellowship of the Ring, then here's your chance to leave, go away, read it if you are interested in it. I feel like even though we're going into spoilers, that everyone seems to know roughly what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you, this is your warning. We're now going to dive into our spoilery thoughts on the book. So where do you want to start with spoilers?
I feel like I kind of want to talk about the different people that were chosen for the fellowship. Like I feel like I kind of just accepted it the last time that I read it, and in the movies, you know, like it is what it is. But I find the choice of companions quite odd. Like this is a huge undertaking. This is determining the fate of the world. If you fail, everyone dies. Like your world is going to be pretty much subjected to this ruler who's going to make everyone slaves. I'm like, how do you think it makes sense to send 4 hobbits when you had Elrond sitting right there? Like, what are we doing?
It's like, we're going to choose 9 and not, that's it, 9.
Right. And like, okay, fine. Like if you want to do 9, like you want to keep the party small so they can go a little more unnoticed. I get it. The number doesn't necessarily need to be so hard and firm, but we'll go with it because Elrond's eccentric. But like, why do you throw in 4 hobbits and you have these extremely powerful, very skilled, very smart elvish lords who you could have sent? Like, what are you doing?
Maybe they didn't want to go.
Maybe they didn't, but I feel like I would if I knew that I had a lot of skill and the fate of everyone in the entire world was resting upon getting this ring to Mount Doom. I'd suck it up and go.
You'd be like, Pippin, Merry, you're great, but what do you add to the table?
Right. They add nothing. They actually are detrimental to this. I mean, the men have to carry them on their shoulders, and Pippin drops a freaking rock down the hole in Moria and wakes everything up. So it comes and attacks them. I'm like, I don't think they were the best choices.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I feel like if there was like 9 Gandalfs, they should have done it. If there were 9 Gandalfs.
But we only have the one, unfortunately. But I mean, Elrond, come on, is anyone really more boss than Elrond? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't suspect a hobbit, but I mean, they kind of mess things up a little bit.
Yeah, I get what you mean. That it's like a funny cast. I mean, I never really thought about it because I just accepted it. I was like, well, that's the group. But I guess when you think about it, you're like, why would they pick them? But yeah, I would agree. It does take a long time for the fellowship to form, that you do have a lot of time with them just journeying. there's a lot of journeying in this book. I wrote that down. Lots of journeying.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a lot of fantasy pulls from that, because you get a lot of journeying and quests. Like the quest thing is big, especially in fantasy. So I feel like a lot of it pulls from how he decided to set his up.
But I mean, I knew going in that it's a journeying type plot. Like the whole trilogy has a lot of journeying in it, because that's the main premise, that they're journeying to destroy the ring. But I did feel like there was a lot of movement, especially in the beginning. Like I'd say the beginning of the journey was a bit slower. That there was all that time where they were just waiting around Hobbiton for a while, and then the start of the journey wasn't as like dramatic. I think in the film they sped it up. That whole section at the beginning of the book was a bit more fast paced in the film.
Oh yeah, 100%. In the book, in the movies, I don't think he stayed and waited at all. Like when Gandalf came, he's like, "Well, what do I got to do?" He's like, "You need to leave immediately, get to Rivendell." And then he takes off with Sam, and then Merry and Pippin just kind of fall on him and end up going with him. So. But I agree. I think it made no sense. Should we ask Bombadil to take the ring and basically say, "Oh, he doesn't care"? I see. When I was younger, I felt like I thought it was stupid that they didn't have Tom Bombadil do it. But now rereading and like, I get it. Like you can't have him take it. He gets so distracted and he's just like la-di-da. He probably would forget what he was doing halfway through and just like go wandering off.
Because they did say about why they couldn't give it to Tom Bombadil. Like there was that sentence of it would just be delaying the problem.
Right. Yeah, like he could hold on to it in his realm, but like eventually they'd find out how to get it out.
Yeah. I mean, I did quite like that scene where Tom saves them from the willow tree, and then it just became a little bit too much.
Yeah, I agree that the part with Tom felt a little more pointless this time through, especially because I feel like most of the things that Tom was teaching us and explaining, we didn't get hardly any information out of him. Like it was just these vague hints. Even though he spent an entire day teaching the hobbits, we learned nothing. Like he wrote nothing of it into the book. So that kind of bugged me this time around, where I was like, you could have spent a lot more time having them like learn from Tom and like letting us know what they were learning instead of just skimming right over it.
But I liked it. I liked the scene when they got to Rivendell. I liked when they were there. They spent a while there, but I liked it. I liked the like council room that they did where they all told their individual stories at that point and explained what they'd been through. And I was like, okay, this is like the coming together of everything. We're going to form our plan now. So I liked that whole section and like the reuniting between Frodo and Bilbo. That bit.
I know, I thought that was sweet. I really actually like the relationship of Frodo and Bilbo a lot more in the books. I feel like they kind of built on that a lot and had us really see like how attached Bilbo and Frodo were to each other and how important they were to each other and stuff. Like I really like that a lot.
Yeah, that was nice to see. And then we've already talked, wrote world building down, but we've talked a bit like that there is a lot of world building.
Yeah, there's a lot of world building.
Yes. One thing I did note down is with the characters is there's not really a lot of women in it.
There's practically no women. Arwen and Eowyn, who comes in later, are the only major female characters, I think, in the whole entire series.
Yeah, it's very male. I mean, I guess write what you know, and maybe you didn't know that many women. I guess I'd rather have a book with no women than very bad female representation.
Yeah, I feel like Arwen in the books is so much more lame. She does nothing. Like they literally have her hidden behind veils at dinner, like in a canopy of some kind. So yeah, I just think his version of Arwen is much different than the movie version, and I prefer movie version Arwen to the books.
Yes. I feel like are there more women in the film, or just maybe they have more of a presence in the film?
No, there's not. Well, Galadriel. Oh, I totally forgot about her. But she's only barely in there, and she's only in like the first one really significantly. But yeah, because Arwen is so much more in the movies. Like you see her a lot because instead of Glorfindel, she goes and rescues Frodo, and then Galadriel is in this one too. But she doesn't really leave. She just kind of hangs out in her forest. But yeah, they do give her more in the film, and I really liked it. And I think it made sense for them to do that as well, because I mean, they didn't really need to introduce Glorfindel in the movies because he was such a minor character in the books and he went out very quickly. So I think it does make more sense to plug in a character who was going to be within the like show consistently for the 3 movies and be a more important person, to kind of give that as her entrance, so we like have more of an attachment to her, because we really weren't going to ever see Glorfindel again. So I think that was a really smart choice that they made in the movies.
But yeah, it would have been nice if one of the Fellowship could have been female.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. I was like, why do these all have to be men?
Yeah, everything is men. But have you ever gone on to like the Reddit threads of it and like different? There's people on there that are like, well, a woman couldn't have made it. Like it was a hard journey. A woman couldn't have made it to Mount Doom. And I'm like, ooh, no, that's not how it works. I don't know. I love the books, but I do agree. Like, there's definite obvious misogyny in them. It's like, it's just a fact.
Yeah. I mean, I can appreciate that there's lots of different races in here. Like, we have dwarves and hobbits and humans and elves, like whole different types of people, but they're all very male.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And even in The Hobbit, everyone is male. Literally. I don't know if there's even a woman in The Hobbit. Yes. So that's one of my things with the new movie that's coming. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but the female dwarves didn't have beards, which I found kind of disappointing. I was kind of looking forward to that.
Well, so the female dwarves are meant to have beards?
Okay. Well, there's conflicting information within Tolkien's universe whether they have beards or not, but it is mentioned that they do. So people were very disappointed that they didn't. But like in a later thing that came out that like came from his son, right, where he was looking at stuff, I think it says that they don't always have beards.
Okay.
So I was hoping they would do it though, because I thought that would just be awesome. I mean, what other universe gives their women beards? None.
Yeah.
I mean, that's possible, but I don't think it necessarily means that's the way you have to write. I mean, he was married, he had a wife, so he spent a significant amount of time around at least one woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different time.
It is, yeah.
It was like The Hobbit came out in the 30s, this came out in the 50s, so it was a very different time. I think it was just something to bring up as like, if it was a modern publication, I feel like it would be quite a glaring thing. Whereas I guess we've got this in like our history now and our nostalgia that I don't feel like it's so obvious. Like, I didn't automatically think, oh, these are all men here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would have liked to see more like boss women, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I feel like when you say, I can't imagine the term boss woman and the 1940s really being 50s being a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they are, but it's not recognized as much. But I think in the new show, they're going to really showcase more of the female stuff, like Galadriel, which I think is really cool because I think she is amazing. I absolutely love Galadriel. And so I'm really interested to learn more about her backstory because I've never read the Silmarillion and I'm pretty sure that she's in there.
I've not read that one either.
I'm planning on reading it before the show comes out because I think a lot of what's going to happen in the show is in the Silmarillion. But I've always loved Galadriel. I just think she's so awesome.
So do you have a favorite scene from the book?
Favorite scene? Oh, that's really...
What is everyone's favorite scenes?
Gladriel is the best. It's true. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Do you have one? You try yours first as I'm thinking.
So, I mean, I quite like, I guess it's when things are a bit more action heavy, when they're in the mountain. Is it Khazad-dûm?
In Moria.
In Moria, yeah. And everything is going on in there. I just feel like it's the darkness. I was like getting quite tense for our characters, even though I know what's going to happen. I'm still like, it's quite tense in here. It's quite dark. Don't like it. So I quite liked that. Although when they were like went off into that little room and they started reading the crypt, the tomb room, and I was like, come on, get out of there. You've got to get a move on. Like, stop hanging around and trying to figure out what this book says. Just take the book with you and leave. Get out.
Yes, agreed. Whenever you stop to read something, you're gonna get in trouble. Like it's a fact. Like, have you never read books before?
Just get moving.
I know.
And the scene with like Gandalf dying.
No. The thing is, though, when I first read it, he died, right? Because I had no other knowledge other than what the book gave me, and so I was like devastated because he was my favorite character.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess like I'm reading it knowing what happens in the rest of the series,
right?
But yeah, like I guess it's a spoiler as well if you've not continued on. But Gandalf's death is pretty big.
Oh, yeah. It's traumatic.
Yeah, and it comes out of the blue because you're like, but Gandalf's such a big character, like
right? Yeah, because they can't survive without him. They're never gonna make it.
No, like you can't. These hobbits aren't gonna make it without Gandalf there.
No. I think, yeah, I agree. I really liked the time in Moria. I think it was extremely well done, and he didn't drag it out too much. I think he did a really good job of keeping it a little bit like shorter, because a lot of the journeying time he does like really drag out. But the Moria stuff, I think his pacing was really good. Actually, I think he did a really good job with that.
Of keeping it like tense, but like fast paced, sort of tries to get out of there.
I'm kind of curious, though, how did Gollum get in? If the door was shut and blocked, how did he get in?
Well, you know what Gollum's like. He has his own secret ways.
How would he know a secret way into Moria?
He's old.
He's never been to Moria. You're trying to make it work.
Maybe he snuck in. He found a way.
Right, obviously he did, but I'm just so confused. Like, how did he get in? Because in the movie they kind of break the door, so he could have like snuck in through holes. But in the book they close it and then like barricade it, and so I just don't know. He used ways. I did finish the book. So proud of myself.
Like, yes, tick, another book finished for March.
Right? I have done very poorly in March, so I need all the book finishing I can get.
Well, you've got the weekend.
I do, but I need to do homework. Oh. It's bad. It's real bad.
Yeah, Gollum, I mean, that's like, I love Gollum, but I hate Gollum, but he is such a character.
Yeah. I feel like it seems kind of odd. Thank you. If you have watched the Hobbit movies and you've seen those elves, to think that they were the ones that had so much pity on him and were just so kind to him that he was able to escape. Because I think in the books, they are different than they are in the movies. So yeah, it's crazy to think that the elves let him escape when the elves are so smart. Like, how did that happen?
Like, you let him outside to climb a tree because you felt pity for him, and then when he just stayed in the tree, you didn't like go up and bring him down. It does seem
you
a
didn't
little
find that suspicious that he wouldn't come out of the tree.
And then suddenly he's vanished and you've lost him.
Yeah. I felt like that story was a little harder to believe. I was like, okay, well,
Because
we'll go with
okay,
it.
not normally, but like, because it's so normal to have a prisoner. But like, if you have a prisoner, you're not gonna release them because you feel pity for them, especially if you
Right.
know that you need to keep them locked up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, especially like, Gandalf has requested that you don't let this thing go.
Yeah, it's not really very logical.
I know. I found that part kind of. Eh.
There's not really very many orcs in this one.
Yeah, just in Moria.
But I feel like we don't really see like that
Right.
much orc.
It's true. We don't. But I mean, at the end, like the very end, kind of.
I don't know. I feel like I like a little bit more of the evil. Like when I guess that will come, that we'll see more of the evil. Like I guess in this book we're presented with that there is this situation, there is this evil force, but we aren't really presented with what this means, like the orcs and the what they call the Black Riders.
I feel like the Black Riders threat seems very present, and the orcs are just like positional almost, like where you are, whether they're there or not, and the Black Riders are kind of following them everywhere. So you kind of have that threat of the Black Riders, but the orcs are like, oh, orcs are in Moria, so here is a place they might attack us. Where in the books, it almost feel like the orcs, or in the movies, it seems like the orcs are a little bit everywhere. Like you run into them a lot.
Like I don't know, maybe it felt more threatening in the movie because I could visually see them.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, I'm like, oh, it's just an orc.
I felt like it was kind of interesting how in The Hobbit, when I was reading the book, it says that there were goblins in the mountain, and the goblins were the ones that attacked them. But in this book, it says that it was orcs. So I don't know if that, like, why they wouldn't have changed that and made it match. Because I'm sure someone else has noticed that. But right in the Hobbit, it was the goblins that captured them, and the goblins that had the Goblin King, and the goblins that Smeagol would eat, right? But then in this book, it's orcs.
I didn't spot that, but that's a good point. I mean, I know at least the edition that the audiobook, there's like an introduction, and he was saying that like between the first publication and this one, that he did make some edits, or that people did write to him and inform him of things, and some things you can't change. Like this is the book.
But I feel like you could, because in The Hobbit, you wouldn't want to change it because it's kind of important that it's like the Goblin King and all these things. But in here, you could have just changed the word orc to goblin and no one would have even noticed. Like it wasn't a significant enough change in this book because they never went back to that same place. It's not like in this book, they went back and it was orcs. No, it was just mentioned that it was orcs. So I don't know why you wouldn't have changed that. Like it's a very simple change. And it would made consistency.
And you'd think that because he spent so much time on his world building and world that everything would be consistent.
Yeah, or at least little things like that would be consistent. I don't know. I felt like that was kind of odd, especially because it did say that it had gone through edits. Like they had changed things. I'm like, oh.
Well, maybe you need to write to his son and be like, you know what? The goblins and the orcs, they're not the same thing.
They're not. There are different ones. Yeah. So I found that kind of interesting.
Have you managed to think of your favorite scene?
I don't want to steal yours, but I really do agree. I think Moria is my favorite time when they're in there, and it's just very exciting and creepy and atmospheric. But I do like Lothlorien as well when they're in there. I really love atmospheric places. I feel like it's just so beautiful, and I like that in my books. So any place that's going to have a good atmosphere, like Rivendell too. But I think probably like Moria or Lothlorien were probably my favorites.
I feel like the book, it got better as it went along.
I
think like the first few chapters where he's really talking about the hobbits and the hobbits' families, I was like, this is a little bit much.
It's like, do I care? Not really.
Like he did get into his stride as it went along. Once he'd done some of the groundwork and he could move on with the quest and the actual plot, once he'd formed all the relationships. And although he's still dropping a lot of history, the grounding blocks have all been done. I think it got better when we had a bit more plot and movement.
Yeah.
Towards the back end. What do you think of the ending?
I think that the ending is fine, but it's not real. The way he wrote it is he wrote it as one full book. And so it wasn't really an ending. So in my opinion, the ending is kind of abrupt. It doesn't feel like the end of a book. Things don't really feel resolved. And I think that makes sense because that's not the way he wrote it. It's kind of like The Way of Kings when they just cut it and made it into parts 1 and part 2. So when you cut it off, it doesn't feel like the ending of a book. And I feel like that's how I felt about it, is it didn't feel like the end of a book, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, it does end on like I guess a bit of a cliffhanger in a way, that you know that Frodo and Sam are going off in one direction and then the rest of the Fellowship is not with them. So it does live that, it gives you that hook to keep going.
Right.
But yeah, it's not like a climactic ending, or there's no resolution in the ending or anything.
No.
And I did mix up something that happens at the beginning of book 2 with the ending of book 1, because it's in the ending of the film, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it happens at the end of the first film, but the beginning of the second book.
Yeah, and I think that was probably a good choice from the filmmakers, because that does make it more climactic.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
You have Boromir's departure, as the chapter is called.
Yeah,
from the second book, that is included within the first film.
They did that in the second film too. They changed something from the ending of the. I actually think if they would have added it into the ending of the second, it would have been more climactic. But they added it to like the beginning of the third. So,
okay.
Which is kind of interesting. But I feel like they cut a lot of stuff too. So I don't know. What do you think about the fact that they cut Tom Bombadil completely out of the movies?
So, I mean, it seems as though Tom Bombadil has a lot of dislike from, at least what I've heard. Like, a lot of people don't seem to really love Tom Bombadil. So maybe it was a good decision. Or maybe they were just like, there's a lot of characters already in it. So how do we try and condense this? And make it a bit more about forming the relationships between the Fellowship and the characters that we do have, instead of trying to introduce even more. But it has been a long time since I've watched the film, so I definitely want to rewatch it. Like now that I finished this first book,
right?
So that I can have like fresh thoughts on the book versus the film. But what do you think about it?
I thought it was actually a really great idea. I do like Tom Bombadil in the book. I think he's a very interesting character, and I just thought he was fascinating. I really enjoyed their time, like with the tree and then with the Barrow Wights. I thought that both of those things were very interesting and exciting. But I do think that it was a good call to cut it, because it doesn't really make sense. You know, like even when we've read the book and finished it, like I don't really know who Tom Bombadil is, why he has all this power. Like, you don't really get it.
And it doesn't really add to the rest of the story. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's sort of a side quest.
Yeah. Yes, it's a side quest. I like that.
So it doesn't it doesn't add to where the plot goes after that.
Right.
He does seem like an interesting character, and I do wonder if there's like more theme philosophy to him as a character. I don't know lots of the influences for this. I mean, I know that it was being written during World War II, so although he says in the intro that it wasn't like an influencing thing, I feel like it must have been an influencing thing, because it was going on in the world. Like, it's obviously going to be shaping.
Yeah, you're influenced by that. That's one of the major things happening in your world. Even if you're not taking direct inspiration from it, it's still going to like influence you.
Yeah. So I do wonder, like, I haven't looked into all of the reasoning behind the different characters and all the details. I'm sure there's a lot of details that a very avid scholar of Tolkien could provide.
Yeah. I'm not quite that.
You're not a scholar of Tolkien?
I'm not. I would love to be, but I just don't got the time for that.
Because I think there is a lot of lore to it.
There is a lot of lore.
So do you have any other thoughts on the book?
I kind of wanted to talk about the differences of like Aragorn and Boromir's characters in this book, because I feel like they're different than the movies portray them to be. And I actually think I preferred both of their characters in the book to them in the movie. Like, I loved the characters in the movie, don't get me wrong. Like, Viggo Mortensen was amazing. Like, they were so good. I really loved them. And I mean, of course, Sean Bean, like the person who dies so well in everything he's in. But I liked how they were done in the book, because in the movies, I feel like they portrayed Aragorn as so much reluctant to pick up his mantle as the king, and like to really follow that path and to do what he was born to do. And Boromir so against him, and it's like almost like they were at odds, because Boromir's like, Gondor has no king, Gondor needs no king. But in the book, he's like, we'll take any help we can get. Like, come help us. Like, yes, definitely.
In the book, they don't really seem to be like conflicting. Really.
No.
They're not like antagonists or butting heads. So
right. Yeah, I like how they did that better. And like the sword was reforged here in this book, and that was kind of like Aragorn's choice too, where he's like, yes, you're right, it's time now, like let's reforge it, this is it. And he's like going to do what he needs to do. So I like that better than the reluctant Aragorn who doesn't want to be king and who's fighting against it. And I'm like, no, I like that Aragorn is very much willing to do what he needs to do to help his people and to like help everyone. Like, he's so much better in the book. I feel like he just seems like a better person almost, because he's like so willing to be what he needs to be in order to like help Gondor essentially, but really everyone.
And I felt for Boromir, like, although you could see that scene at the end where he's like confronting Frodo, I was like, but it's not really him, it's the ring's influence on him. Like, you could really see that it was the ring that was driving this emotions out of Boromir. I don't know if that's so clear in the film. In the film, it just felt a bit more like that was his personality.
Yeah, I agree. I think the film makes him to be a little bit more of a bully. You know, where he's kind of like, he's wanted the ring all along. And he mentions it in the book where he's like, well, why don't we just use the ring? It seems like this would be a great power for us to have. But then when Elrond explains it, he's like, no, this is a bad idea. Boromir's like, oh, okay. Like, he accepts it. But I feel like in the movie, they kind of make it out that he never accepts it. And he always wants to take the ring and go to Gondor with it. And I don't know. I like it a lot better in the books. Yeah. Yeah, where he's like, do I go to Gondor or do I go with the ring? Do I go find Merry and Pippin? Because they dumb.
Yeah, they dumb. Cool. So I think I've got out all of my thoughts. I think both of us are planning to continue with the series. It seems a bit funny to just stop here. So I think we are planning to continue discussing the books and the series with The Two Towers date TBC and then The Return of the King in the lead up to the new show that's coming out, which I'm definitely...
We should do the Silmarillion too if you want to, because I feel like that's going to have a huge influence on the show. So if you're up for it, I'd be good for continuing to read the whole series plus the Silmarillion.
Well, definitely this. We'll see about the Silmarillion.
I'm going to do it, so you're welcome to join, but I just don't know when I'm going to get to it. Hopefully before the series. It's in September, right?
We've got time.
We've got time.
So I think we will leave it there, but thank you everyone for joining. I hope everyone enjoyed the book if you read it, or maybe you're encouraged to go and read it and watch the films now. I'm definitely encouraged to go and rewatch the film, maybe even the extended edition.
Yes. I've actually never watched the extended editions. I don't own them.
I have. but years
My
ago.
husband owns them, so maybe we. So I guess I do own them. They're his, but we own them, I guess.
So yes, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Stephanie, for reading this book with me.
Yes.
And I'll see you all soon.